of all, I'm so happy to be here with you today. And this is great attendance. I know it's a rainy day. I drove in from northwest Montana and got here just in time to have some great folks help me get set up, and looking forward to spending time with you, because this is the Spokane Authors and Self-Publishers Group. And so I know that today's going to be a little bit a different talk, but so many artistic and talented people in the room, and I had an opportunity to see some of your works here. I overheard some of you talking about projects you're working on now and new material that will be coming out from you. So first of all, congratulations in doing that, because I know you support one another as a group, and artists need to do that, and it's not always the case. There can be a lot of competition in there. So I'm sure you're a great group. Sue says you're awesome people, and she enjoys spending time with you. And I look forward to talking to you. And you kind of set me up in that introduction there, so I'll follow through with it. But what I'll do is talk a little bit about the new book. I'll give you a little background on the series, but I'm going to talk about the new book because it's out and it's impinging. This one's hitting the mark, and I'm not playing tiddlywinks with this book. So I'm going to give you a little background on me, a little bit of story about this book, talk for a little bit, and I'll touch on why I tackled this global situation in fiction. Because I know there's a mixture of fiction, nonfiction writers in the room, and poets and so on. But why did I tackle it in fiction? And then when we're done, I know they've set up refreshments over there, but we can do a little bit of Q&A, and then I'll go to the book table, and you can get books, and we'll talk further as we go. But in my background, as Sue introduced me, I am a long-term television and film actress. And it's not about the credentials there. There's a certain type of discipline and training that goes into being an actor who has the opportunity to play real people. And that has been my case on numerous occasions in guest starring and starring roles in particular. And so there's an approach that the actor takes on character analysis there that put me in a position to be able to write the White King series. That was part of it. But that career does go now 40 years and a long time. And I'm no longer acting. I retired from that a while back because I had transitioned into writing. And I didn't realize that I was going to need to write the White King series until 2004, when America was dividing at a time that it should be uniting. And, you know, if you can remember back now, 2001 seems like a long time ago now. But it wasn't that long ago. In any case, that provided an impetus. And my own personal background, and I appreciate that you did put the Dazzling Daughters in there, because that was an honor that came to me. Frankly, I was stunned. I had no idea anybody submitted me. I didn't even know what it was, let alone that I'd been submitted and selected, until a packet came. And my late husband, who was one of my publicists, greeted me at the door, and he said, "You better open this because you're requested in Washington, D.C." I said, okay, and I just didn't get it until he said, "Lee, go to page 2 where they listed out the other 120 women." I said, "What is this about? I mean, how can I possibly be selected to be put in a group with Susan B. Anthony?" And I took the invitation, and I went to Washington to Constitution Hall, and I figured it out by the time I got there, and then they told me, because they asked for a copy of the first book, White King and the Doctor, and they asked for a photo portrait of me playing Margaret Truman when I did in the movie Collision Course with Henry Fonda and E.G. Marshall. And when I got there, they said, "You've been selected for contribution to the country through the arts." And so you're all artists, and I don't know what your passion is or where your mission is, but we all make a difference, and I think we know that as artists. But we can also change and impact our country, and I'll talk a little bit about that today. I'm an 8th generation descendant of a man personally recruited by George Washington to fight in the American Revolution. He was a poor man, upstate New York, Adirondacks area, and he was given land by Washington if he could fight with him. And obviously they had to win, or the land wouldn't have been worth anything. So, are we having trouble with sound?
Yeah.
Okay, do you just need more volume from me?
No. That's on, right?
Yeah.
Is there a red light?
Yeah. Yeah, we're on. I got a strong voice. Do you need me to
There,
just...
it's on. It's on. It's on.
Yeah, it's been on the whole time.
Yeah, I know, but it wasn't.
But it wasn't on back there.
Yeah, now it's working.
We're not doing a take two, so I'm not going back and starting over again. You don't have to worry about that. But what I was saying about John Adsit was they did win. And my family comes forward through the decades, and then we fought on the side of the North in the Civil War, and I've had family in the World War II, the Korean War, the Gulf War, and so on. But when I was little, my parents, as they taught me the history of the Revolution, really explained to me, and I accepted it, that I had a responsibility in this country and for this country because of the heritage that we had, and that it was really up to me to turn it over to the next generation in an improved condition because we've been advancing forward. Didn't start perfect, and we're not perfect now, but to advance it forward. So I always took that to heart, and that's why when we got to 2004, and I spotted what I spotted, I was just frustrated. I mean, a lot of us might have been. I mean, the division today I'm going to talk about. But back then, I looked at that and I said, that's a symbol of actually a manifestation of a fifth column. Now, some of you may have military backgrounds, you may know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, a fifth column is a force planted inside an area that's about to be attacked for sabotage and to break the solidarity of the place that's about to be attacked. It's to weaken it from within so that the four attacking columns outside can attack. And I recognized that there was a fifth column in the United States because in addition to the acting background that I had, there are two other factors. Number one, I've been a student of the mind for over 30 years, so I understand exactly how the mind works. I'm not talking about the brain, those are two different things. How the mind works, and I'm also a student of mind control and how that can be implemented and how it affects people. And in addition, I have, as Sue mentioned, a business background. I've had a marketing company for over 35 years. I learned a lot in business, but I learned about marketing buttons. That they're called in marketing buttons. In propaganda, they'd be something far worse, far more sinister. But the idea, those are words or phrases or symbols. And I'm going to bring it up now because it has a lot to do with this book. That when you see them, or it's a visual image, you see it or you hear it, it punches a button. In marketing, and properly done, it's to arouse your interest, your curiosity, your response to something. In propaganda and mind control, it's designed to turn you into Pavlov's dogs. All right? So in any case, I looked into the arena and I said, you know, the actual mastermind of Al-Qaeda has a unique background, and I was just doing my own research. I never do research with the intelligence community or any of those people. I do my own look. And I said, you know, I think I can figure that guy out. I think I can figure him out. And because every one of us has a purpose in life, and every character has a driving motivation. And I said, let me see if I can identify Ayman al-Zawahiri's driving motivation. If I can, I'll be able to predict what he'll do in the future. And so I did my stuff and wrote down little scenarios of I think he'll do this, I think that'll happen, and they started appearing in the news. And I knew I had him, but I also knew I couldn't walk into the White House or the Department of Defense and say, hey, I'm out of Hollywood, I think I figured out your guy. So I said, what can I do? And I said, if I could write a good enough story that would be entertaining in and of itself, I could reveal the truth of what I've discovered in the story. And that became White King and the Doctor. Now, at that time, I was writing in advance of history, but history caught up very, very quickly in White King and the Doctor. Now I'm regarded as a prophetic writer, that when I write these suspense novels, they come true. And you were right, I thought I was done with the third book, because the White King and the Doctor laid out a strategy and the tactics to, number one, take down the American free press. Number two, turn Americans and our country's strengths into weaknesses. For example, to take righteousness to self-righteousness. Self-righteousness is a weakness, righteousness is a strength. And so that was all laid out in there between the mastermind and his propaganda chief, who is inside the United States. And so it was designed to turn us into stimulus response people. So that something happens and we have an immediate stimulus on that. Well, that book, as I said, played out. And then I wrote the second book of a Trojan horse that was put into the United States so that agents could come out of that Trojan horse and then do the work that they needed to do. That also proved true. And so that Trojan horse is very real. So when you get into that series, you're literally going to be walking through the last 15, 16 years of your life, but from a different perspective. And that's the point I want to make as well. I changed the angle of perspective. Current events, I write political fiction, I write suspense novels. They involve current American history, but they're written either through the point of, they're written through the point of view of the enemy. And that changes your angle of view so that the same things that you've been experiencing, maybe even writing about, because I don't know all of your backgrounds, when you see them from a different angle and you connect the dots, a different picture emerges. And that's the story of the White King trilogy. So the third book I didn't expect to write, but I realized, well, wait a minute, who sent the Trojan horse? So I just asked myself, who sent the Trojan horse? That led me out of country and into the hands of the large international bankers. And I really did think I was done. And then the catalyst for this book, and I'm going to preface my statement even because I don't know you all, and I know I'm in Spokane. I write political fiction. This is not partisan politics. It's politics in the sense of the governing affairs of men. There's nothing political or partisan political in this book. It's kind of important to understand that. This is about an enemy of us all. So no matter what side somebody's on or what viewpoint somebody holds, this is the story of who has turned us into this and how they're doing it and why they're doing it. The catalyst was January 6th rally. I was at that rally. And it wasn't until late afternoon that all of the thousands of us on the west side of the Capitol even knew anything had happened. It wasn't that inspired me to write the book. It was that I drove home to Florida because I split my time between Montana and Florida. I was driving from the Capitol down to Florida, and I found out that that afternoon Twitter had withheld, they actually blocked a video made by the President of the United States. He was trying to communicate to the people at the Capitol Mall, but in the United States as well in a time of emergency, and they held it up for 90 minutes. And now see, I have just a different mind. I go in different directions. I said, wait a minute, Twitter's a corporation. Who gives a corporation the right to usurp the authority of the President of the United States? It wouldn't matter to me. It was Trump that day. It wouldn't matter if it happened to Biden today. I'd be just as up on it because it's the President of the United States. And I said, what's going on here that Twitter thinks they have that authority? A corporation. I said, no, who gave them that authority? Who's really calling the shots? And it was at that moment I knew I was going to have to come back on the field and I was going to have to figure out what was really going on here and what's been influencing us. But I also knew it was a global picture. So instead of just changing the angle of perception, I had to really step up and back and take a God's eye view. When you go through this book, I mean, you've read it kind of from the mountaintop, and I took a God's eye view so that I could see global events and begin to connect dots that way. And what emerged is the story White King and the seat at the table. You're actually going to live with this book. This is, in my view, the ultimate battle between good and evil, and we're living in it and fighting it right now. And the enemy is very clearly in sight for me, but the book's an allegory. Some people have read it and call it a parable because it really comes down to lasting elements and issues related to good and evil and a final victory. And so this is a very urgent book, and this is newly out. It's been out just a few months. But I told people that all the book events that I've done and television appearances, I said, you got to read this one first. And I'm going to be the only series author, because I know some of you have written series as well. I got to be the only author you'll ever run into in America that says, read the last book first. It's that urgent. And I appreciate why, that you invited me to spend some time with you today, and I want to convey a message to you. The information in here, revealed through my characters that people have been living with, read this one first, because it will give you a perspective on things that we are living with and experiencing that may be puzzling the heck out of you right now, or causing a lot of emotion or anxiety or fear or doubt, and all the things that are going on in America. No question, when you read the whole series, it's a richer, deeper experience, but we don't have a lot of time on this. The book contains a solution, and that solution is straight out of the American Revolution and straight out of Thomas Paine. And it is, when you get to that point in the book, and I know I promised I wouldn't spoil and surprise anything for you. Okay. I won't reveal it. There is, it's called Operation Stone Age Viral. And at that point in the book is handed off to you. You, as the reader and citizen, carry the rest of this story forward. And so it's Operation Stone Age Viral, 10 by 10. When you get to that point in the book, slow down, pay close attention. The book is going to scare the daylights out of you. It scared me to even have to face this level of evil and this level of coordination and planning. And so it scared me. It will scare you, but I always write with hope. I will not start a book if I cannot solve the problem and bring forth a solution. I did it with each of the other books. I've done it with this, but it was hard. And the easiest way I can describe what this enemy is doing, we're playing whack-a-mole. You know that game? And they're not small moles either. You know, the issues that we're confronting, every one of them is a major issue. But the propagandists will bring them up in a certain rhythm and using perception management, attaching emotion to it, so that as an issue comes up and you want to tackle it and weigh in on it, it's huge and it can almost overwhelm you and it's hitting you with emotion. And then just as you start to settle in with it, another one comes up. Has anybody experienced that? It doesn't seem to matter, that everything is popping up, and that's a strategy to overwhelm till eventually you succumb. But we're playing whack-a-mole. Unfortunately, it's a game set up by the enemy. We're controlled by the enemy. They're not playing whack-a-mole. They're playing chess at a grandmaster level. And even worse than that, they're playing three-dimensional chess. And that was something that I had created and theorized in the first book, because the main hero, it starts out at age 18 as a grandmaster chess champion, star football quarterback, and headed to MIT. That's where you first meet Andy Weir. And the three-dimensional chess does actually exist, I found out, but chess players hate it, and it's not in the 8 tiers that I did. I literally did a cube. And this enemy is doing exactly that. I was able to spot it because of what I spotted in my first book. Same players, different games, different roles in different games. So it's actually kind of easy to hone in on them. Good news, by the way, when you face evil, it folds. Evil's game is to get you so scared you can't face it. And that's why the suspense novel. But remember, as I talk and as you get into this, that this is an enemy of us all. It's not about politics. Now, I'm just going to set this down for a minute, because what's happened to us is this. It's a stalemate. American against American, other countries experiencing the same thing. And when you're locked in like that, if you actually do that demo yourself, you'll feel it brings tremendous tension into your body. And it'll start to make, and your muscles may reflect on it. And that's the condition that America's in, and that's where the book almost starts. That we're locked in, and there's an actual emotion binding us into this standoff. That's why I said it's not about politics. It's not about Democrat or Republican. This is not about conservative or liberal, because that's this. I'm trying to write about who made that happen and how do we get back to this. Because what has to happen is that instead of being like this, and if you were to do it, you would feel the pressure. That this book is designed to dissolve that emotion that's binding it like that, so that we relax, kind of come back to ourselves, and the book directs attention to the actual enemy of us all. And Americans, if we are actually looking at a common enemy, will unite. So the solution in here was designed to bring us together and help us unite by dissolving the emotion that is keeping us locked into a very unpleasant environment at the time. And perception management is a new term. I said I know a lot about mind control. Yeah, old terms, brainwashing, mind control. Then they changed the term to propaganda, and then they changed it to something really aesthetic and wonderful called public relations. And now it's elevated even more to perception management. Lovely term, isn't it? And so the propagandist or the mind control person, and these people do know what they're doing. They're real, they exist, and they know what they're doing. They are managing your perceptions. And I just said, well, if you're gonna do that to my people, my country, I'm gonna manage some of yours. And I hope when you come through this, that your perception on things has changed. Were you a little calmer when you came out the other side? Had more hope? Yeah, that's the single biggest comment that I get from readers is that, oh my God, I was so scared and so frustrated, and I have hope now. I have hope. Power is in us. So that's the perception management. But since you're all writers, I have been asked, and in normal environments, I have to explain to people why they should read this novel rather than the other 9,000 nonfiction books that they're reading on the subject of politics and world affairs and so on. They need to read those too, but they need to read this first. And how many of you in this room are fiction writers? Oh, big chunk.
Both of us are both, because we write for the
both,
magazine too.
And I do too. I mean, but with fiction, you can use creative imagination. With nonfiction, and some of them are great and they're well researched and they're factual and they're accurate and they're enlightening and they're informative and so on. But when you run out of actual data and it stops, you gotta stop. If the writer has any integrity, they have to stop when the data isn't there to support the theory anymore. The fiction writer can insert the creative imagination. Keep in mind, I'm also an actor and trained on character motivation and human motivation and the human mind. I can apply, like you can, creative imagination, and we can bridge that gap and take a look at it through the likely, very real thing. The data's there, it just hasn't been found yet. And that's why my first 3 books, they prove true. The data was always there. It just hadn't surfaced yet. But I didn't wait for that, and you fiction writers probably don't either. You want to carry your reader to a point and you're going to use creative imagination. My view on artists is that artists lead the world, we don't follow. It's the artist's vision that can and will create the world, because the artist has the vision of, it has a dream, and a vision of something that can be, and that's not just writers, inventors or artistic, that the artist leads, has a vision, and he puts it there in some artistic form, and then other people read it or watch it, and they agree with it, and then they bring other people to read it and watch it, and over time, more and more and more and more agreement comes about to the point that it actually materializes in the real world. But it starts always with the dreamer. It starts always with the artist. And so I've had to tell people in the political world or media world or whatever, or just, political junkies, even sometimes say, no, look, just relax a little bit and understand that you start with the vision, and then it'll help you sort out what other books you need to read, how to prioritize, what sequence, and so on, because you'll see things more clearly. And I remind them that there's a tendency, and some of you fiction writers might have run into that depending upon the form of fiction that you write, is that people will dismiss it or devalue it. Oh, it's just a story. No, not from my point of view. So I hope that resonates with you. I respect you if you're doing that. But if you look over history, man's history is full of stories. Man tells his history through stories. And when you think of it, I wonder, would we still have the Soviet Union if Alexander Solzhenitsyn had not gotten his novels out from behind the Iron Curtain? Because at that time, the world was embracing communism. And they were fascinated with that idea. And you fight ideas with ideas. And the world was going in that direction massively. He gets these novels out from behind the Iron Curtain, and people got to read them, and they realized, whoa, this is what the reality of the outcome of that ideology or philosophy or idea is. They began to reject it. But come back to our Civil War. Well, we still have slavery. If Harriet Beecher Stowe had not written the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, there were massive debates during the Constitutional Convention. There have been debates for 80 years on slavery and non-slavery. It wasn't like the idea was not being challenged. She writes that novel, and many people read it. Changed the angle of perception. Brings you through characters. And through those characters, people perceive life in a different way, because we're all good people. but we can hold ideas sometimes that aren't productive. And then, you know, in play, anybody here playwrights as well? Okay. Take A Doll's House. Would women's suffrage have happened, not only in the United States, but globally, if Henrik Ibsen had not written the play A Doll's House? So the examples would be too numerous to mention. But that's the power of the fiction writer, the playwright, and whatnot. But also, just today, for this book, there's other reasons that people today can get solutions. When people are reading a novel, especially if it's a suspense novel, there's heroes and villains. The reader starts to identify with the hero. You would know that because you write this stuff. They identify with the hero. They begin to reject the villain and the viewpoint of the villain. Now they're in the story, but they put the book down, turn on TV, or they put the book down and go to work, and all of a sudden they hear somebody say exactly what the villain, Ernst Schweiner, said in here, or Peter Loren, or some of these other characters. And they go, wait a minute. I just read that in the story, because the story is carrying the person to a higher level of awareness. And so it's that hero identification that has helped people see things a little bit differently, through a different perspective. Fiction is also a bigger audience if you want to tackle politics today in any way, or global governance, or all these issues. It's a bigger audience, it's a younger audience, and they love stories. And they will read stories and stay with it. And the other thing has to do with an open mind. The perception management people, the mind controllers, have worked this very, very well. Now, I'm going to put the mic down on this, and I realize that'll affect the video, but you have to have an open mind. It doesn't have to be that open, but it has to be a little bit open for a new idea to go through. And, you know, in a story like mine, for the story can go through an open mind and carry solutions, carry ideas, carry awarenesses that bring the reader through to the other side so they're stronger. But we have been set up and programmed, the machinery's in, and you'll probably recognize it, that just certain words, certain people's names, certain networks, certain organizations, certain dates, anything will cause it to slam shut. So Americans, being generally open-minded people, kind people, we're trying to look into arenas, but we have been absolutely set up and programmed that buttons get punched and the mind shuts. At that point, nothing gets through and no solutions really happen, and there's ever-increasing frustration. Does that make sense to everybody? So my task when I wrote this was I'm going to write it in such a way that I have purposely left out every button that I could think of that would cause somebody's mind to close. So that even if the mind was just a little bit open, if they read the book and got started. What was it that you said you were 10 pages into it and you were hooked? Was it you, Kate?
No, I was, but it wasn't me that said it.
Oh, it wasn't you that said it. It was you. Yeah, 10 pages and you were in. Yeah, so your mind, but I don't know where it was. But anyway, the story's traveling now. The story's traveling, you're living with the characters. So we're trying to avoid this in this book and get to an open mind. Make sense? Okay. Kind of important, because otherwise, anybody feel in life, maybe even in family discussions, you know, your Thanksgivings aren't fun anymore, your Christmases aren't fun, that everything is boom, like that. And I'll tell you a quick story. Before I left Florida, I did a couple of major events, and but one of them was a private one, and it was a group of mostly women. There were a couple of guys, and it was quite informal, and we were just chatting, but it was about why I not only wrote this, but why I wrote it the way I wrote it. And everybody in the room was just listening and fine with it. And then one of the gals decided, and it's not a criticism of her, because we were there in conversation, she decided to ask a question. She asked a question about something currently in the news, the Russia-Ukraine thing, and this was when it was about a month into. She started to ask a question and then tagged it to the media of, do you think they would be covering this if? And she didn't get all the way through her question before another woman stood up, said, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. I cannot listen. I cannot participate in any conversation like this. And she stormed out. Now, the woman never heard the end of the question, let alone the answer that I would have given that would have shocked both of them. But I said, now that's a great example, because the woman didn't know what to do, somebody walking out of my event because of something she'd said. And I said, well, that was an actual living example of a marketing button, one of these perception management buttons. You accidentally triggered it, and there it was. Prior to that, the mind was open, discussion, listening, boom, shut. So this book will help you help other people navigate past their buttons. It was written that way. And my goal was, as I say, to help people keep their mind open. And the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, is I want people to read this first, not last. Because there's an image I can give you, because we all live in this beautiful country, where there's mountains. And I live in the foothills of the Cabinet Mountains over in Montana. I tasked myself to see if I could take the reader, who's awake and aware and engaged in various activities to try to make a better America, if I could take them to the mountaintop. Because I live right at the base of the Cabinet Mountains. My backyard looks right up at the first peak. Have any of you ever read the book by Robert Schuller called The Peak to Peak Principle? In years past, yeah. So you climb one peak. When you're first climbing or looking, you can't see the peak above it. You just see the one you're climbing. It's only when you get to the top of the first peak that you can see the second peak. When you get to the second peak, you can see the third peak. That was kind of a life lesson. It was a positive mental attitude book that he wrote, but it is. It's the peak-to-peak principle. Mountain climbers would know that, but that's the same with me. I look out on my patio and I'm looking up and I see my first hill, my first mountain there. It would be quite a project to climb. And I can't see anything else. I can't see the rest of the Cabinet Mountains. If I go downtown, which is just slightly downhill, and I look back towards my place, I see a second mountain range. And if I go across the river, the Kootenai River, on the riverside and run along parallel to it and look back, I now see a third mountain range in there. If I go over, we were talking about Route 56 and heading down, if I go over 56 and head down towards that route to Sandpoint, I look to my left, I see all the mountain ranges and the highest peak. So in changing the angle of view from straight on and having to increase the elevation, changing it to the side, I can see it all. But also, I said, I've got to help Americans get from the foothills to the peak, because it's happening to you faster than we're fixing it. Is that real to you all, that we're kind of in a pickle in this country? All right. So that was what I was attempting to do with the book. And in order to do that, I had to reach the mountaintop myself. This is the toughest book I've ever written, toughest thing I've ever had to face. These people are real. I've fictionalized their names. I've made composite characters, but they're very real. And I had to get to the mountaintop. I could see more than most could because I had the opportunity to write the 3 other books. But with this one, I said, I'm going to task myself to get to that mountaintop, take the reader to that mountaintop so you understand who's doing this to you, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it. At that point, they lose their power because you know their game. Now, they're up there already. But when you get to the mountaintop, you're up there with them. You can see every move they're about to make in that whack-a-mole game. You could actually dismantle their whack-a-mole game. You could even set up your own whack-a-mole game that would drive them crazy. Because you can't do it from the foothills. And so it's a story that has a lot of fun. The characters are really fine. The solution is very sweet. The book is horrifying as you're traveling through the danger zones. But the solution is very, very sweet. And my goal was to alter the reader's perception so that they see more clearly, they have more hope, they understand that something is in fact being done to them, and that they just have to kind of go with it and figure out a solution. Because I'll end with this. My dream, remember my heritage, my dream is that America remains, but my dream is that man remains free, and that man remains man. And if you don't understand what I meant by that last sentence, you gotta get this book, you gotta read it. This is a very big and final game that this enemy is playing. And we're all the solution. You, more than others, even if you're not politically, as I said, it's not so much about what the politicians are gonna do, good Lord. You're the artist who can convey a message in whatever form. So anyway, those are some thoughts on the book. I look forward to talking to you further. We have time, I think, for some Q&A, right? If anybody's got questions about anything, actually, go ahead. Yes?
I do have a question, and that may be partly unrelated to the book itself, but I would like to hear your perspective on this question based on your experience. I'm from China and I grew up under communism, and so I understand extraordinarily and intimately what is the fight we are in. However, there's one thing I have not figured out, and I like to think I figured out everything, but one thing I haven't figured out, and I like to hear what you think. Because of the fact that, I'm very intimately, familiar with how communism works, so I'm watching China very closely, but I could not figure out if China is the model for the Great Reset crowd, or is China the test ground? Are they modeling after the Great?
They are not modeling after China.
So are they using China as a test
Well,
ground?
now keep in mind I write suspense novels, so I can't give away too much of the ending of this thing, but I will answer that question as best I know it. Let's just put it this way. China wants a seat at the table. And that thing that you've been struggling with is an integral part of the plot of this. And it involves some internal traders, and it involves China, and it does involve that model, but there's actually a different model that they're morphing into that goes even beyond what you experienced in China. For those on the camera there, she grew up in China and is intimately familiar with a lot that I've been talking about. So it is in there, absolutely. When you get into it, you're going to find probably the answer to your question in there. But I can't tell it to you right now. Okay. You know, I had an NPR guy, wasn't on this book, it was over in Helena, and it was a big meeting, and all the business people and politicians and so on, and they asked it, but it was for a service organization. I was there to talk about young people. I was there to talk about how we've got to get this next generation involved and engaged and so on. And then they went into question and answer, and all of a sudden this guy, because he'd heard about the book White King and the Battle of America, asked a question, and I said, I'd love to answer that, but you're going to have to read my book first. And he said, I don't want to hear that I have to read your book first. You need to answer that question. I said, sir, I don't know who you are, but you've got to be the media. You've got to be in the press, aren't you? And the whole room went quiet. They didn't like that. They did not like that. But later, when everybody left, the person who had created the meeting and invited me came up and he said, that guy who did that was the head of NPR. I said, okay. This is not, the media's not going to like this book either. So they would if they really read it. So have fun reading it and then communicate with me what you feel about it after you've read the book. Okay? Yeah.
We're all a composite of our life experiences. I'm interested in knowing what you feel caused the transition, or what contributed to the transition from actress to writer.
Well, I had always done some writing. I am a screenwriter and I am a playwright, but I wanted it as a career for flexibility in my life so I could live where I wanted to live. But the actual real catalyst is, I'll just be blunt, she said I was honest, I despise Hollywood today. I despise everything it is and everything they represent. And it isn't about politics. It started for me in the 90s because my resume, if you were to look at it, is some really quality projects. And they were projects that changed this country in a positive way. And by the 90s, I was watching the deplorable way that men were being treated and written about as characters. That there was a full-on assault upon men. And I said, I'm not going to do a project that degrades and humiliates men or makes them appear stupid or whiny or not who they are. I'm not going to do anything that attacks men. That was back in the 90s. then, and again, you know, this is just me. I'm not a big proponent of infidelity and promiscuity, and I was beginning to watch great writing with terrific actors, terrific directors and production values, but the message it was carrying was, I felt, destructive to the American family and destructive to our country in the long run. And that goes back to the late 90s. Now look where we are now. And so I was phasing out, and when I moved with my late husband to Eureka, Montana in 2004, I had told my agents, you should consider me semi-retired. Because, and also, when you read White King Rising, you will realize that an enemy is attacking along a pharmaceutical line through Big Pharma and so on. And I said, now, if you even try to send me out on commercials, I gotta go home and study every ingredient, every person, every study paper on it before I can even show up at the audition, because I'm not a hypocrite. I said, this is getting to be a very hard thing as compared to the fun I had at the beginning of acting. But for me it was, I can't participate in it, because we're artists. We're responsible for the effect of what we write. And even if somebody's writing something light with the sheer purpose of just entertaining somebody and making them giggle, that's a purpose, and it's a worthwhile purpose, and we're responsible for the outcome of that. And so I said, listen, I can't be in these things where the outcome's going in a direction that I don't personally believe in, and I don't want to take the American people. And then they started to argue with me, because I was far enough up that they started to say, well, no, we're not having an effect upon people like that. We're not degrading, we're not changing America's youth's minds on anything. We're not presenting them role models. We're not doing anything to them. And I said, then what the heck are we doing? We're artists. The purpose of art is to create an effect. So if we're not having an effect, you guys are just taking a lot of money for nothing. But I don't that. You know exactly the effect. And I've been blacklisted 3 times, okay? That was the other thing. I said, I'm done with this. I'm done with having my career threatened, destroyed, and I'm done with being bullied, because I'll stand up for myself and other people. My dad raised me that way, and you know, when you come out of the revolution all the way down the line, and probably some of you are not, you know what I'm talking about, but there can be a price paid for standing. But this is a tool, by the way. I wrote this, hi. They've had a rainy time, yeah, okay. I wrote this as a tool for you all, and for your family members, because since it does not slam that mind's door, and it is an entertaining story, and it has a value in and of itself. The worst thing that's happened to people who've read it is they just go, yeah, it's a nice story, great, I read it, interesting, enjoyed it, nice. Others of it, it changes who they are, it changes their life. So I wrote it as a tool that you could give to others and just say, no, look, this is not about politics, this is not about any of that stuff. It's about an enemy of us all. It's a great suspense novel, the 4th in a series. And that's my best way of reaching through to people right now that don't want to talk to either me or you or anybody. Yeah.
With all of your experiences with the books that you've written, have you found that you've gotten any pushback from media or, you know?
Not pushback from media, because I write with the first book. What time is it?
It's 2:52.
And you want me done in like 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, about
good.
10.
Because we want to save time for books and refreshments and so on.
And we're probably gonna have a short business meeting.
Okay, in the first book, I got some support from some major people in counterterrorism after having proven to them that I was not a terrorist. I've had an interesting journey with the White King series, let's just put it that way. So I'm probably on a watch list somewhere, but I literally had to prove to the head of MI6 and a whole bunch of other people that I was not a terrorist, because I was writing about things they did not even know, and then they would discover were true. That's that creative imagination thing. So once that happened, when I got my first, I think it was Fox and Friends was the first interview, big one. But one of them, they said, we're gonna ride shotgun with you. And they didn't mean literally, shotgun. They said, if somebody comes at you and tries to attack you because you're an actress and you're out of Hollywood and you're not really in that world, and they want to dismiss or devalue what you've written, we're gonna ride shotgun and say, no, this one, you need to read her stuff, because she's revealing truth. if we tried to reveal it to you, being part of that community, it would scare you to death, so it would paralyze you. But in the fictitious stories that Ms. Kessler writes, you can get the truth, you understand it, and you can digest it. So, real, and take it as real. That helped me on the media. I haven't had any pushback from counterterrorism, counterintelligence, military intelligence. I don't deal with them very much because they miss stuff. They miss stuff, yeah.
Who or what is White King?
Well, it's a reference to a chess piece. The mystery of the first book is who is the White King? And, but I'll answer that today because, as I said, I want you to read this one first. The White King is the American people. We're the target. No matter what goes on out there where you think something else or someone else is the target or some individual, it's us. And that's why this is rooted in the American Revolution, and the solution is rooted there. We started something long ago, and we have to finish it now, positively. But if we go, is it real to you that if we go, the world goes, freedom-wise?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that's not really a partisan thing. That's just a reality as a citizen. And this is the story of the people who want to make certain that they nail the coffin shut now on you being the White King. And so this is going to reveal to you how they're coming at you. The whole series does. But anyway, it's been fun sharing. We'll have more time, you know, when you come by, we'll have some more questions, but I want to turn it back over to Sue for the rest of the meeting. And I hope that was fun, and that I certainly had fun talking with you. And it's fun to talk to artists because you see things through your own unique minds. All right, Miss Sue?